Okay, welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Okay, so I have finally finished this book. It feels like I've been reading this for a month, even though it honestly took me a week. It also feels like one of those books that I read insanely quickly and insanely slowly at the same time. But lord, do I have things to say about this one. So The Priory of the Orange Tree is a true high epic fantasy. And so there are several plot lines running concurrently. We follow Iad, a mage/dragon slayer from the Priory of the Orange Tree, who is in disguise as a lady in the court of Queen Innis. She acts as a secret bodyguard to Queen Sabran, because legend has it that as long as a queen of her line sits on the throne of Innis, the Nameless One, the ancient evil dragon that almost destroyed the world 1,000 years ago, cannot come again. Then there's Tane, who is training to be a dragon rider in the east, in a place where dragons of the sea and air are seen as sacred gods, and the only real protection humanity has against the fire-breathing dragons led by the Nameless One. Then there's Loth, a young nobleman of Innis, whose close friendship with the queen has gotten him banished on a fool's quest to Yescalin, I think is how you pronounce it? The only kingdom in the world that swears allegiance to the Nameless One. And finally we have Dr. Niclais Ruse, an alchemist who was exiled from the West 7 years ago for falsely promising Sabran an elixir of immortality. He is determined to do anything, morals be damned, to get home. They will have to reach across the abyss between the East and the West to prevent the return of the Nameless One and the destruction of their entire world. And that leads me right to the first thing I need to talk about. The Nameless One is an existential threat to all of humanity. Both the people in the East and the West, people who follow every religion on this planet, know that the only goal he has is to kill and destroy everything. And that's cool. I've spoken before about the fact that I do not see a simple, straightforward evil as a flaw. I think a really pure evil antagonist can be useful, especially when they are something inhuman. But here's the thing. If you take that pure evil and then give him a following, you're gonna have to give me a reason why. This book features not just an army of draconic creatures that follow the Nameless One, which makes sense, they are his progeny, but also people that follow him. There are cultists who want the Nameless One to come back, and a kingdom that bows to the Nameless One's armies. And I don't know why? Like, what is the Nameless One promising? What is he offering? Even the mere presence of dragons cause a plague that is supposedly incurable, though we do get one person cured out of pure plot convenience. This plague, though, is said to have a 100% death rate, and is an insufferably painful way to die. The fire-breathing dragons and their offspring eat humans, and they burn everything. What person is going to look around and go, yeah, sounds good, sign me up? Like, at least some of the people are being forced to work with dragons, though even that I sort of question, considering they're already having their country burned and people eaten alive, and like half of the kingdom is dying of plague. Like, at that point, you're not saving anything by like obeying. Like, why the hell are they not rebelling? And one character makes it clear that they think everyone is doomed and that they might as well get what good they can out of it before everything burns. But like, still, what good are you getting? Who cares who is on the throne of a land where everyone is dead or dying in horrific pain while the world burns around them? And yeah, people sign on to some bullshit in the real world, but it's because someone is telling them they will get something out of the bullshit. They will get money, or food, or hot lovers, or sparkly things, or power. None of that is on offer here. And that was just the first of many logical problems I had with this damn book. Characters maintain skills without any practice, as well as mastering new skills in a couple of nights of experimenting with no guidance. The same stretches of land are traversed multiple times in wildly inconsistent times. Loth walks across a desert with no real supplies or experience in a couple of days, while Iad traveling with a caravan across the same expanse and with experts takes a couple of weeks. Characters have plans that rely entirely on chance and luck. Part of Iad's plan at one point to get back an important object involves asking for a glass of wine and assuming a servant would bring her the glass on the way to deliver another glass, and that both glasses would be conveniently somewhere she can tamper with them. Which is a huge effing assumption. Another plan that is hugely important to the entire plot relies on the fact that a man found in a rowboat in the middle of the sea would immediately be brought before the most important person in the kingdom, even though we are sailing towards what might be the most important battle in the world's history. There's also the fact that this is a largely court intrigue-driven book where no one seems capable of lying or hiding their intentions at all. We're told that Iad is so good at subterfuge, that she has managed to hide that she is a heretic to the dominant religion in this kingdom, and that she is a mighty warrior for years. Yet all we see her doing is defying the religion, showing off her fighting skills, and all but rubbing in people's faces that she is not what she appears to be. And it's not just her. All Loth has to do at one point is not immediately start screaming about how the Yescalin court is full of evil heretics, but nope, literally 2 sentences into the conversation, he's berating the queen for abandoning his religion. And the thing that almost broke me, that almost had me dropping this book entirely. Spoilers ahead, this spoils a surprisingly big point in this book. And I don't really feel bad about spoiling it because it's so fucking obvious. But we get informed a couple of times that there's some bad guy in the Innis court who is called the Cupbearer. And everyone who hears this is like, but the Innis court hasn't had a cupbearer for decades. Nobody is in charge of serving the queen wine. That's not a job. And meanwhile, one of the most important nobles in this kingdom, who is about as close to the queen as possible, has a family emblem that is 2 fucking cups! We are told multiple times about her wearing this emblem on her person. And I'm like, I had dismissed that person as just too damn obvious as a possibility. But our heroes? No, they are shook. They never would have thunk it. Are you kidding? That is less of a twist than where the clues were on the average episode of Blue's Clues. But maybe that's just because in this world, no one needs to be good at intrigue, because it seems in this world, unlike any human world, all it takes to completely shake someone's core beliefs is to just tell them an alternative story. A huge part of this book is built around the fact that the religion of Innis and about half the world, Virtudom, which I will get to, is based on a lie. The story they built their world on was one that that random knight defeated the Nameless One the first time, and he won the hand of a princess named Cleolind for his bravery. And their line is what keeps the evil dragon bound. And it's not true. But these people have literally built their entire world and culture on this story. But all anyone has to do is say, nope, it didn't happen like that. And almost everyone is like, okay, I guess my core beliefs are bullshit. Now, a couple of times they have token resistance. They say things like, I'm not sure about that. Or, I'm afraid if I believe you, that will change everything. Or something like that. They may even end a conversation claiming their beliefs have not changed. But when we next meet the character, nope, they accept the truth. And we are not talking about with long conversations with lots of physical and historical proof. No, I'm talking about someone just saying, that's not the real story. And that's enough? And that's just not how humans work. I'll give you some homework here. Go out and find a devout Christian and tell them that Jesus was not actually the Savior, and that it was actually his friend Ted, and that Jesus just pretended to be the Son of God so he could be remembered as more important than he actually was. Do you think that Christian is going to go, you might be right, and the next time you meet him, he will be practicing the faith of Ted? No! Core beliefs are core beliefs because changing them requires changing the core of who you are. If you really believe and have built your life around one belief, someone can talk till they're blue in the face, bringing up endless proof and explanations and not even ever shake your core beliefs. And it's not just the people's religious beliefs changing at the drop of a hat. The East will never work with the West unless someone suggests it nicely and explains how it would be for the better. The West will never work with the East and the South unless one person suggests it might be the only way to fix the looming disaster that no one has actual proof is coming. There's no reason to believe that this character is actually on our side, except that she said she is. So that must be okay. And hell, it works out! Turns out, no one ever thinks to pretend to be someone's ally. No, I can literally think of 2 times that our master of subterfuge directly says something untrue. And of course, no one calls her on it, even though it's insanely obvious. Because it seems no one lies in this damn world. But I also want to talk about the structure of this book. This book felt like it was crawling at the beginning. And that's really a part of the genre. High epic fantasy always starts with what I'm going to call intro dumping. The book needs to introduce us to all the characters, all the countries, all the cultures, all the religions, all the history, and in this kind of book, there's a lot of it. This book has nearly 30 pages of character lists and glossaries at the back. And in the beginning, when the world is unfamiliar, as a reader, you are trying to parse what is important from a sea of new names, places, and descriptions. And that makes for slow going. But once I got through that, I was honestly impressed with how easily this read. It's got a good bit of poetic descriptions, some interesting turns of phrase, and complex enough prose to feel adult, but still read smoothly and easily. I could read this one while I had a video running, which was good. Because by the time I was about halfway through, I had to have something playing in the background or I would get bored and put it down. The entire middle section felt like a damn waste of time. There's a mad dash escape to the south, and that just felt like a plot cul-de-sac. We could have had Loth just go north instead of south and save 200 pages, and very little in the story would have had to change. Meanwhile, Tane and her side of the story just completely fucking disappear. And then there's the last 200 pages, and it felt like I was reading the Cliff Notes version of the story. Every conversation felt clipped. Training and travel is skipped. We are introduced to new characters, but with absolutely no time spent on getting to know them. The Emperor of the 12 Lakes is suddenly a character, and he's given monologues as if we were supposed to care about his tragic love affair when we barely know him? Old characters finally meet each other after, hundreds of pages of foreshadowing, and we are shown absolutely no relationship development between them. Loth goes from being Tane's captive to wary ally to friend with almost no on-page conversation or interaction. She trusts him because he has an honest face. He trusts her because he's a trusting moron. And everything happens so damn easily. There's not a single serious hiccup in any of the character's story after the witch steals the sword. And even that doesn't feel like a roadblock when Iad is 100% sure the witch will bring the sword to them. Tane's dragon is injured, but no worries. Before she could even start struggling cross-country, another mode of transportation makes itself available. Ultimately, this needed to be 3 books. At least. The first third actually works as a book on its own, and pretty good book on its own. The second book needs to be completely rewritten to give all the random journeying a purpose, and the last book just needed about 100 pages more to make the threats real threats, give characters time to breathe and develop, and the action needs a hell of a lot more explanation. 'Cause, yeah, the last battle made no damn sense. First, I never got a clear idea of how big the various dragon subspecies are supposed to be. Second, I had no idea what the dragon riders were supposed to be doing on Dragonback. Like, Naomi Novik in the Temeraire series really clearly thought out how a person would fight from Dragonback. They use projectiles, they drop bombs, they land fighters on other dragons and on ships and shit. Here, the dragon riders just seem to be sitting there while their dragon fights. But they have swords and spears that they logically would never be close enough to their enemies to use. Third, dragons fucking fly. The only weapons that would be logical to use against them are projectiles. But everyone's got a sword or a spear. And the fucking final blow. Huge spoilers here, but oh my god, I cannot not talk about how illogical this was. So Iad is standing on a ship with a broadsword. Though it can't be that broad of a broadsword, considering for some unknown reason it fit in the sheath that was designed for what I can only assume was meant to be a katana. So, yeah, somebody doesn't know anything about swords there. And there's a dragon that is described as big enough to, you know, chomp another dragon in two. And it's flying at her with its mouth open. We can presume it's going to try to eat her, or blow, like, fire at her, or even just, like, I don't know, poke her with its teeth. And somehow, she is not swallowed alive. No, instead, she stabs him through the heart with the sword. How did she get past the mouth to the spot on his gullet that was supposedly damaged that she could get through his armor? And for that matter, like, how did she get to his heart if this was only like 20 scales down from his mouth and it's described as on his neck and this is a mountain-sized beast? We can presume his heart would be proportionally even further in his body. And a broadsword, at most, at absolute max, we're talking about 6 feet. So, mountain, 6 feet, that would barely pierce his skin. Like, someone clearly did not think about the physics of this moment. And also, like, the rest of the scene, the rest of the conclusion is barely described. Like, I have no idea what fucking happened in the last of that scene. And, like, the rest of the fight scene, there's all this description of people running around in blood, and I'm just like, that's not how this fight would logically make sense. Like, I do not know what you think is happening on these ships, because it's not what I would assume would happen. Taking a breath, I think the reason this book was so irritating to me was because, yes, I had heard it was great, so I had very high expectations for it, but also because the promise is there. Like I said, the first third is a pretty good book, and it's got an interesting enough world. I like the themes of women not being reduced to incubators, and women's stories being hijacked for men's narratives. I like all the religious, like, themes. But it's all just a little bit ham-fisted. Like, directly stating a theme repeatedly does not make it complex or interesting. And all of that would have been forgiven if I just cared about these characters a hair more. Like, I love some books that I'm fully aware have huge plot holes, logical problems, and inconsistent rhythms. But I need there to be something that I love, and that something is usually going to be the characters. But this book, like, Iad was likable enough, and given enough development for me to care about what is happening to her. Tane, mostly the same, though, as I mentioned, her story just fucking disappears for a full third of the book. Loth is likable, if dumb as bricks, but Ruse and Sabran both had huge problems. Sabran, as we first meet her, is cold, doesn't show much compassion for anyone, and is fine with burning heretics. And I get we were supposed to see her open up more and grow after Iad gets to know her, but the book relies really heavily on making her seem pitiable and then using romantic interest to convince us to care about her. We could have seen more growth from her if we had seen, like, say, for example, her accepting Iad's different religion before anyone else does. But nope, we're not actually shown a single other character really caring about the fact that Iad isn't a true believer in the virtues. So, in the end, I just never really built a serious attachment to her. And Ruse? Fucking Ruse. His arc felt less arc-like and more like random bumpy line that suddenly took a hard left. Throughout the entire book, he is intensely dislikable in the present, and only likable in memories because, once again, we are led to pity him. And his lover clearly cared about him, so there must be something redeemable about him. We keep hearing people say there's something redeemable about him, but all we're seeing him do is shitty-ass things, and thinking shitty-ass things. Like, there's a character that he sees die, and he shows no remorse for it whatsoever. He's just sort of like, oh, okay, that kid's dead now. And then his big change of heart, it didn't feel like it came from anywhere believable whatsoever. And I get that the author was trying to set up this suspenseful moment where we're watching it going, oh my god, is he going to? Is he going to? Is he going to? But instead it just felt like it came out of the blue. And his entire addition to the climax was completely irrelevant. Like, it could have gone forward with almost exactly the same, like, plot moments without him. Objectively, I think this entire book could have gone from beginning to end with him never being more than a passing side character. And because of that, his arc feels even less arc-like. It's like we're being told he has an arc, but we're not actually seeing it. To make things worse, the character I liked best died 200 pages in. And he is not the only character who was sacrificed just to give the main character some trauma. Tane, Ruse, Loth, Sabran, they all have random secondary characters who are attached to them killed off, just so we could have them have moments of intense guilt and shame. But notice I say moments. Most of the mourning lasts a paragraph, or even just a sentence. Then there's Tane's roommate, who is set up as this secondary best friend. Like, she has one best friend, but she has another best friend that she's, lived with for years and cares about so much. And she's then shipped off to Feather Island, and we hear nothing about her until 300 pages later, when there's a passing mention that she died off-page. And then there's this thing that I've been trying to hold back the entire time. The fucking names in this book. Loth? Loth? You want me to have an emotional attachment to a character named Loth. Like Sloth, but with the S cut off. And yeah, it's short for Artaloth? But that has even worse mouthfeel. And Ead. Like, I mean, maybe I'm saying it wrong. But as a friend of mine commented, Ead sounds more like an exclamation than a name. And Ruse? Like, that's another one. I've heard some people pronounce it Russ, and I'm like, that's not how it's spelled. It's spelled Ruse. Sabran? There were a lot of names that looked like normal names, and it wasn't until I tried to say them aloud that I realized that letters were transposed in places they should not have been, which made them incredibly awkward to put your mouth around. And I'm not even going to try to say the dragon names, because, of course, they put random, like, accent marks in interesting places to make them seem foreign and interesting. And all of those names just felt super awkward. I really feel like the author did not say these names out loud when she was writing. And the big religion in the West is called the Virtuedom. Virtuedom. And it's also the name for, like, all the kingdoms that worship the Virtuedom. They practice the virtues. And yeah, it's descriptive. It's clear. I get it. It's straightforward. But it also feels like the filler name you come up with when you're trying to think of a better name for what you're going to call this religion. So overall, yeah, I was severely disappointed in this book. I had heard so much about it being great and creative and feminist and lyrical, and I just found it hollow. It felt like none of this had finished baking. I don't know, y'all. This book just wasn't for me. And it's a bit infuriating when you're 400 pages into an 800-page book and realize you are not enjoying yourself, but also care just enough to bother finishing it. So, no, I don't really recommend The Priory of the Orange Tree. It's pretty to sit on the shelf, but that's really all I got out of it.